Traditional job postings are boring and do not really provide much value to those candidates reading them, especially to those seeking ACM, DCM positions and department director level roles. I think it's time to do something different. Hello, everybody. I'm Joe Turner, and I'm the host of the City Manager Unfiltered podcast. I've been kicking around an idea for many months, and I want to throw it out there for your consideration. We can take these boring job listings and turn them into living, breathing podcast advertorial episodes. I want to start a new series on the podcast called Come Work With Me. Because let's be real, there is a lot of risk assumed by these candidates seeking senior and executive level vacancies. And much of this risk centers around the personality of the city manager, as well as their leadership and communication styles. If you are a city or county manager seeking to fill a high-level vacancy, why don't we discuss the benefits of you advertising your vacancy through this podcast? This could include something as simple as announcing your recruitment on the show or doing a full-length interview where you can communicate the things that you've accomplished as an organization, where your city's been, where it's going. You can talk about the strengths, the opportunities, the challenges facing the candidate. A full-length interview is going to give these candidates so much more information and help them determine whether or not they are a good fit for you. Because at the end of the day, it's not important to get the most candidates. It's important to get the right candidate. And I really think that a comprehensive interview on this podcast will assist you in that endeavor. So if you're interested in discussing this further, please email me at citymanagerunfiltered@gmail.com. Thank you. Now, before we jump into this amazing interview with Jorge Garcia, he is a first-time city manager in Pismo Beach, California. Absolutely beautiful community. He has an exceptional story. You're going to be really impressed with this interview. But before we jump into that interview, I want to make a quick announcement. This Sunday, I'm going to drop the first ever Side Hustle Sunday interview with Noel Bernal. A couple weeks ago, I released an episode about side hustles and passive income streams with Nick Loper. I've received a ton of positive feedback from so many managers, and they enjoyed it. And so I sat down with Noel Bernal. He is the former Adams County, Colorado County manager, and he's involved in real estate investing. And we're going to have a Side Hustle Sunday interview where we discuss his journey. And I'm going to talk a little bit about my journey in real estate investing. And I think you're going to really enjoy it. And I'm hoping to do these on a once-a-month basis. I'm not sure how frequently they will occur, but I'm ideally shooting for the first Sunday of each month. And I hope you enjoy this episode with Noel Bernal. So stay tuned for Sunday. Make sure you don't miss it. And I would really appreciate getting your feedback on that episode and whether or not you think I should continue doing the Side Hustle Sunday series. Now, without further ado, here is my interview with Jorge Garcia. All right. I'm Joe Turner, and this is the City Manager Unfiltered podcast, a podcast for city managers and other public sector executives. It is the most influential local government podcast in America. We have a different show for you today. This is my first ever in-person interview with a city manager. It's kind of strange to be actually sitting across the table from my guest. And I think you guys are going to really like the show because we're going to cover some interesting topics that we've never covered before on the podcast. With me today is Jorge Garcia. He is the city manager for Pismo Beach, California. And Jorge, I got to tell you, man, beautiful City Hall. This is like an amazing experience to come up here and do this recording. I tried to sneak my seating arrangement on the other side of the table so I could look out your ocean view out of your office, but you got it today. So introduce yourself, tell folks how you got here, and give them a little brief on your background, and then we'll jump into it.
Yeah, thanks, Joe, for having me. I'm really looking forward to it. I think you're right. We probably have the best City Hall view anywhere in California. Staring at the Pacific Ocean. It's funny when people say, "What are you looking at during a Zoom?" And I'm like, "Oh, there's just whales jumping out of my window."
So he's not lying, folks. You can see the beautiful blue ocean from his office.
It's definitely, it's a great place to be. So I've been city manager in Pismo Beach. I just celebrated my first year on October 3rd. So excited about that. Been with the community here for 6 years. Started as the management services director, overseeing the manager's office, HR, risk, communications. Then got the title changed to assistant city manager. Have 16 years total in local government. Before here, I was in Orange County, was in Santa Ana, where I was born and raised, was the assistant to the city manager there. And then worked for the communities of Fountain Valley and Villa Park, both in California. So Started at a city that was 5 full-time employees, 2 of which were maintenance workers. Worked my way to the second largest in Orange County, 1,200 full-time employees. And now I'm in Pismo Beach, where we have 100 full-time employees.
That's awesome, man. And no kidding, folks. Literally, it's a beautiful, beautiful location. If you've never been here before, City Hall sits atop a little bit of a hill or a ridge, and so you just got this great view overlooking the ocean. Jorge, it's actually, wow, dating myself. It's been a lot more than a couple years now. My wife came up here probably about, more than 10 years ago to catch a car show. Do you guys still have your really awesome car show down by the pier on an annual basis?
It's an amazing car show. We've done it annually now. So as a community, we're 8,000 residents, but car show weekend, each day, we have 100,000 people.
Get out of here, seriously?
So we balloon to that, right? Numbers are always deceiving. 8,000 residential. During the summer, our population is about 30 to 40,000, but peak weekends is 100,000. So we have to be able to accommodate populations that swing like that.
There are car shows, and then there are California car shows, and then there are California car shows, and then there's the Pismo Beach car show. It's a solid event. What time of year do you guys have that usually?
It's in June.
Okay.
Yeah, so we usually have it dads and grads. So right in that Father's Day, and then Cal Poly San Luis Obispo, our local university here, that's their graduation weekend. So we time it to have back to back.
Yeah, it's an amazing event. So if you guys ever want to get out to Pismo Beach to check it out, I highly encourage you to check it out that time of year because it's an amazing event.
ExperiencePismoBeach.com. We have great rates.
Nice. I love the plug. Jorge jumping in without even being asked. There you go, bud. Get it in there. And speaking of Santa Ana, they've gone through some little changes over in the city manager chair recently too.
Yeah, they continue to have it. When I was there the last year, we had 5 city managers in 1 year between interims, actings, and permanents. So a few of us that were there were constant. So that's always the interesting part is there may be turmoil at the top, but it's that staff that keeps an organization running when sometimes there's that instability.
Absolutely. And, it's kind of a good segue to talk about your journey here to Pismo, because one of the things we want to talk about has been your journey to the chair in a relatively stable community. Your predecessor was here for about a decade, and then you served as an interim for a little bit before earning the top spot. So why don't we unpack that a little bit? First of all, what made you decide to want to come up from Southern California to Pismo? Because it's, for those who don't know and who live outside California, and I'm a Southern California boy, born and raised, California is 2, sometimes considered 3 states, like Southern California is completely a different culture, vibe, environment. What made you decide to come up to the Central Coast?
Yeah, so for my wife and I, we wanted a different quality of life. We didn't want the hustle and bustle. We were looking for something a little different. And I really enjoyed smaller communities. But with Pismo Beach, you get the best of both worlds because we're still full service. We have our own police department. We have amazing schools. So we looked at the Central Coast as if we were ever going to relocate, this would be it. Looked at a couple opportunities, and this one was the one that just made the most sense for us. Didn't come without its challenges. The Central Coast being a rural county, you have issues with trailing spouse, and my wife is also in local government. So that added some complexity to it, but ultimately quality of life was the number one indicator for us on why we decided to relocate.
Yeah, and well, you can't go wrong.
No. No.
Yeah, that's the other thing too. For a lot of people who don't understand, Central Coast California, it's much more rural than Southern California, where the population density is just so high.
Santa Ana had 350,000 residents. That's the population for the entire county here. So it's just a little different.
Yeah, absolutely. Your predecessor decided to bounce out of here. You were telling me during the pre-interview discussion, he was in Atascadero, came here, and then went back to Atascadero, but he'd been here for about a decade.
Yeah, so he was here for a decade, really focused a lot on investing in the community, a lot of development, did a lot of really big projects. We rebuilt our pier plaza, streetscape, went through our largest paving project in history. We're just wrapping that up now. $15 million, repaving 1/3 of all of our streets in cash.
Nice.
So went through a big resurgence, and now I'm looking to take the organization in a different direction. But we had a lot of stability in the manager's office and then with our council. So when he looked at that opportunity, then it became, okay, how do we set me up for the future? When I came here originally, I wanted to be a city manager.
And that was disclosed, right?
Yeah. Jim and I had a very, very open dialogue about it. When recruitments would come up, we would have conversations about, hey, is this right? What do we need? Where do you need more experience? Okay, you're going to handle labor. Okay, you're going to handle, some of these projects. Right now, we're building our new public safety center, new police and fire station, 53 million all in, paid for 100% by tourists and visitors. So coming up with the finance structure, coming up with the
What a
design
blessing.
build. Yeah, I'm
It's just,
fortunate to be
I
able to do
know.
those things. But it still was an effort, an education process. And he and I were very much lockstep in how the operations of the organization ran. So because we had that, we actually, the last year prior to him leaving, we're starting to really say, okay, you're starting to hit that mark. Let's start looking at opportunities for you.
Meaning he was saying, hey, you're starting to hit that time frame where you're ready to start looking,
Yeah.
right? Because he wasn't necessarily, the Tascadero thing kind of came out
It
of
came out of the blue.
right? So
Yeah.
the goal wasn't for you to succeed him. The goal was for you to fly away from the nest and go get your own spot someplace else, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So the opportunity here was different than I think I anticipated. I was not expecting to be city manager here. I mean, of course, it would have been nice,
Sure.
but we weren't necessarily thinking that's how it would play out, and then circumstances happened and it fell into it. So it was always about, how do I prepare to be a city manager? And for me, I didn't want to just be a city manager. I could have been a city manager years ago, just like
Absolutely.
many of us can. You can make a decision to go different parts of the country, different parts of the state. But for me, I wanted to be an exceptional city manager. So it was preparation and projects, preparation and professional development, putting myself in the right rooms, putting myself in the right circumstances, so that when the right opportunity presented itself, it would be mine.
What an amazing feeling for you to be in an environment where you have somebody who is willing to mentor you, and not just a mentor, but somebody that you're reporting to, right? Because we all know that in certain walks of life, certain organizations, certain city managers or leaders could feel threatened by someone coming up underneath them and like, oh, this person's going to take my job. And so I think that's a pretty amazing attribute for him to have in order to just say, hey, I want to help you get to where you want to go, right? One of the reasons why I started AAME was to help us support each other, right? We should have an abundance mindset, not, a zero-sum mindset that if someone else is succeeding, it's somehow hurting me in some way. So for you to be able to come to work every day and know that you have a supporter, an advocate in your corner who's championing you, not just within the organization, but also outside the organization, right? Talking you up, I'm sure, no doubt. What an amazing sense of support and safety, I guess, in too, right? Not feel like you got to look over your shoulder or doing something wrong, because they're going to be giving you the benefit of the doubt and looking out after you.
Yeah, that fell into everything: professional development, going to conferences, doing all of those things. We have to look out for one another. It's important. And those are things that I've been very lucky to have a lot of good city managers in my corner throughout my entire career, many of whom I still talk to. And now I call for advice as a colleague,
Right.
not just as a mentor. That's an interesting change in some of the relationships that I've had now. Is you transition from the kid who walked into a conference with a suit and tie and everyone else is in polos, and you're thinking it's an interview every day.
You got to prove yourself.
Yeah, you got to prove yourself.
Yeah.
But now transitioning to in that role is it's fun, it's unique.
Now, I want to get to the recruitment and what have you in a minute, because I think that's obviously very germane to our audience here. But I am curious to get your thoughts on the migration from being at a lower level into the organization to the top, right? Because the reality is, when you're in a place for 4 or 5 years, you develop relationships, you have a certain sort of camaraderie, rapport back and forth with individuals in the organization. And then when you get promoted to the top spot, naturally, I would think there'd be some changes in those dynamics, but yet it's a tightrope, right? Because you don't want to be like, oh, there's Jorge, he's too good for us now, right? That kind of deal. But then you also got to maintain some sort of chain of command and respect the chain of command, because obviously you don't want people circumventing their direct reports in order to get to you because they have a relationship with. I mean, walk us through that a little bit.
Yeah, it's an interesting dynamic getting in the seat for the first time. Is you've gone through the academic exercise, you've heard it at conferences, but until you're in the seat, there's a lot of things you don't know. And I think those interpersonal connections, I think, are an adjustment, right? I think, as you mentioned, you go from colleague to now they're your subordinates, and people are looking at every move you make. How often are you going to lunch with that person? How often are you having coffee with that person?
Yeah.
And the last thing that you want to do is have the perception, because that's the reality. It's most of the time it's perception. It's not real, but perception is reality in our business. It's the same thing going from any lower level position into a higher position, but now all eyes are on you all the time. I love going to lunch with people. I love breaking bread with people. I think it's a great way to lower barriers and
Get to know someone,
and
right?
just get to know
Yeah.
someone on a one-on-one basis. But at the same time, those lunch meetings that used to just happen, people walk by your office, hey, we're going to go grab lunch. No agendas, no anything. That's different now. Now it's, hey, let's go have lunch. Oh, by the way, since we're here, can I talk to you about this project?
Yeah.
Or can I talk to you about this permit? That's
And
different.
I get it, because and there's nothing pernicious or nefarious about
No.
it. It's like, hey, this is just a natural change in the workflow, right? Because we're in a different station in the organization. But it can, like you said, create problems.
It can create problems. And then at the same time, you don't get those casual walk-bys anymore. Not the same way. Where I used to have lunch with people 3-4 times a week. Now it's maybe once or twice a month.
Well, because you have to also spend your time talking to people who are outside the organization directly. I mean, that's...
And that's what I think people don't realize. I didn't realize even the extent to which my calendar is just impacted. I have a great executive assistant, Sheila, who keeps me on track, keeps me going and focused. But she also blocks out time for me to say, no, you need your time alone. I also didn't think about that early on in my career before I took the seat.
So I recently listened to an interview by Seth Winterhalter. He is formed a new municipal consulting business, and he's a podcast that's catered to leadership and coaching and whatnot. And he had a Republic, Missouri city manager, David Cameron, on his show recently, and I listened to the podcast. And I'm 99.9% sure I'm remembering this correctly, but he actually has empowered his executive, I think she actually did it on her own, his executive assistant, to essentially block out days where they're like mandatory, nothing on your calendar. These are for you to go get out of the office, go take a walk, whatever, work on your mental health, get away from it. So I think that's pretty amazing to have your staff looking out for you.
And I didn't realize the value of that. Those short little moments, and sometimes it's just going for a walk. Or sometimes it's, no, you need your lunch hour here.
Is that naturally because the level of the game has changed when you get into the chair in terms of the stressors and all that stuff? Because, I'm not saying that when you're not in the chair, you don't have stress and that you don't have obligations, obviously, right? But you can grind and grind. But at this level, when you get to be in the chair, there's only a certain point where you can grind before you hit a brick wall and some bad things start happening, because things start either falling out of balance in terms of your personal life, your professional life, emotionally, physically, right?
Yeah, it happens. And it happens without you even realizing it's happening. There's been times where my entire staff, our city manager's office, has said, hey, we're going to go have cocktails on Friday after work. And I'm like, okay, whose birthday is it? They're like, no,
we're just doing it because.
We're just doing it because you need a break. I can't express how much I appreciate when you have other people looking out for you.
Yeah.
I've had other city managers call me out and say, hey, you're looking a little tired. And I'm like, okay, what does that mean? They're like, well, you're you. You just aren't quite you.
Yeah.
Take a long weekend. And
recharge.
I've done that. Yeah, you have to recharge. I recently have started golfing again, a few friends, and I didn't realize the value of disconnecting for a little bit of time and just saying, yeah, this is my time.
Yeah.
I need to have that time, because without it, the stress and the burden can definitely sometimes be overwhelming.
Absolutely. And as a profession, we're generally speaking really terrible about that. And I think one, because a lot of us are wired to be hard charging and want to get stuff done, right? And that we're passionate about what we do. We just have a really good work ethic. We have a lot of A-type personalities. But the other thing too, Jorge, is like sometimes you're always looking over your shoulder and wondering if, someone's going to try to, whack you out because you did something wrong, you're not doing this. Or, I mean, it's a stressful position to be in. And then, you kind of come back to your situation where you're in your first year, right? You were interim for about 5-6 months or so, and before you were tapped to lead the organization on a permanent basis. I would imagine that in your first year, you're thinking, man, I really got to perform. I really got to knock this out of the park. You're not looking for singles, I don't think.
No. So I think one thing when I accepted the position that was really important for me to express to the council was that I'm a dad. I had a few mentors and my wife that are like, you need to make sure that is very clear.
And set that boundary.
I've been coaching my son's soccer programs for the last 4 years. Man, I love it. One, I get to spend time with my kids, but I'm a part of the community.
Yeah.
So I'm making more positive touches with our community members. So what could be bad about that? And I let them know, and they were like, absolutely, we want you to do that. So it was important because I had to make that really clear and explicit, setting those boundaries, letting them know when I have dinner with my family,
Yeah.
because that's also important to me. And they've respected it.
That's amazing.
They've respected it, and that has made me want to be a more dedicated employee. Not that I wouldn't be otherwise.
No, I know what you mean, but like, hey, you give me my time, you take care of me, I'm going to take
and
care
I'm
of
going
you,
to take
right?
it exactly.
Right. Just like with your staff, right? Your staff takes care of you, you take care of your staff. It's a reciprocal relationship. It's not a transactional one.
And because we have those understandings, I think everyone gets an exponentially better situation. When I need to leave because there's an event at my kid's school, great. And then that evening, I'm still plugging away. I'm reading reports. I'm catching up on financial analysis, different things in the evening. So everyone wins. And I think
well, there's that trust,
the trust is what has allowed us to get there.
Right. Like, hey, trust me, I'm not going to let anything fall through the cracks. I'm going to be on it, right? Give me the flexibility to take care of my family, to maintain my home life, all that stuff. And I'm going to make sure that I take care of you guys too.
And when you have that understanding, that trust, I think it's beautiful. For me, I enjoy it because I know that I can take off if I need to go take care of my kids at 3.
And not have someone
and not have to
second
worry
guessing,
about it.
why? How come the office is dark right now?
Yep.
Or, yeah.
Nope.
Listen up, City Manager Unfiltered podcast listeners, because I have a special risk-free offer that you can't get anywhere else. I have negotiated this exclusively for you from Kudo.ai. That's Kudo.ai. You can make your council and school board meetings more accessible with Kudo.ai, the AI-powered speech translator designed for local governments. Kudo AI is a patented language accessibility solution that offers real-time, continuous speech translation in 45-plus languages. It ensures that every community member can engage equally during council meetings and public hearings, no matter what language they speak. With closed captions available for those requiring assistive listening technology, live speech translation can create truly inclusive and representative communication between citizens and policymakers. Start your free 1-month trial of Kudo.ai today to see how language accessibility can transform your community. To take advantage of this exclusive risk-free offer, go to Kudo.ai/CMU. That's Kudo, Kudo.ai/CMU. I've tried it myself. You're not going to believe how accurate it is. There's no app to download. There's no account to register for. All your users have to do is type in a URL into their smartphone browser or scan the QR code, and that's it. Easy peasy. Go to Kudo.ai/CMU to get your free 1-month trial today. You won't regret it. So I got a question for you. When you were, because there really wasn't a succession plan in the traditional sense, right? Because it was sort of a out of the blue type situation. Had you had the opportunity to really develop relationships with the governing body at that point? Because generally speaking, in a lot of organizations, and it's not like it's a negative, it's not even like it's a territorial siloing thing off, but the assistants don't necessarily always interact with the governing bodies because that's just not really their role, right? The city manager does, right? So what was the level of relationships that you'd built with the governing body at that point? And I would suspect you had to do a lot of work in that regard.
Yeah, that was really something I didn't quite think about early on is, I knew my 5 elected officials. We knew each other. They knew a little about me, but they didn't know.
They see you at the meetings and stuff like that, right? But
they're not in the details. They don't see the work. I was handling not only the manager's office, but operations for the organization while the city manager was handling, their needs. So I didn't quite understand initially why there wasn't the same level of connection, same level of trust that my predecessor had. But once I got into it, I understood it. Then it made a little bit more sense why we didn't have the relationship as well. So that was really important. Tom Hatch, former city manager in Costa Mesa, he and I had talked about it. He had been doing some interim gigs in his retirement. And he gave me some great advice on building trust, building relationships. They need to understand that you are capable, competent, and that your decision-making is in line and consistent with what they want. So he told me, hey, send them a daily email, just bullet points, but at the end of the day, send them an email, and it has 3 components: decisions, updates, and next steps. And I would send them an email. It took me 5 minutes. So it wasn't this arduous thing. It wasn't,
Yeah, you're not sending a thesis paper.
No.
Yeah.
But it was just, hey,
because they're busy too. I assume out here they're not earning a full-time salary.
No.
Like some of the larger cities in California, right? So it's like they got their own world to live in, right?
But when I did that, I was showing them, this is how I think. These are the things going on within your organization, and these are the things on the horizon. Pretty soon, they started telling me, okay, Jorge, we're good. Just give us a weekly. But it was their choice.
Yes.
Because now I had built it. I had earned it.
Right.
Because now they were seeing, now they understood what was going on. They got a window into the organization, and I got a opportunity to earn their trust, which was, I think, then really important going through the recruitment and then the process itself. They went through a national recruitment, which, at the time you're like, why couldn't they just give it to me?
I can see Nancy. Yeah.
Couldn't they just trust me?
There's got to be a healthy dose of anxiety on your part because you don't know who the next person's going to be. I mean, you've been here for 4 or 5 years at that point. You've established some roots. I'm sure you're enjoying the community and the lifestyle. And it's like, well, what does this mean if someone else comes in here and I get passed over, right?
Yeah.
But I want to go back to Tom's suggestion because I think that's really brilliant on his part to give you that advice. Was that primarily geared towards advice that he gives to first-time city managers, or is that advice he was giving to you in the context of any time a city? Do you know if he was making that in the context of any time a city manager makes a change into a new organization, or did you get a sense of what he was?
So I think it was coming more from the interim place because that's where he had been doing it, and I think it's great advice for anyone,
right?
Because it demonstrates decision making, right? Do you have the instinct? Do I have to worry about your decision making? And if the council saw a decision that they weren't happy with, then that gave them an opportunity to ask me questions.
And you're voluntarily giving that out to them, in a way, soliciting feedback from that. Like that, not that you're hiding from it, you're not fearful of it. It's like, hey, okay. Because I also think sometimes elected officials have some concerns about questioning. Not all, because we know there's some pretty insane city councils out there who think that they're actually the city managers. But I do think that especially in some smaller communities, you'll have elected officials who say, hey, this is my city manager. Maybe I don't necessarily want to ask that question because maybe I don't want to look like I don't know what I'm doing, or maybe I don't want my city manager to feel like I'm questioning them. So I think for you to go out there and proactively send that out to them and basically creates that environment that's conducive to discussions and collaboration. I've talked about before on the podcast and on my LinkedIn post the importance of exhibiting your ability to proactively see things in the future, right? To be ahead of the curve, to be a couple steps ahead. And I think that is something that is really important when you're trying to establish credibility and competency with your council, because it kind of goes back to, and I've actually articulated this point, and it spins off of what you just said. If you're able to communicate to them that you essentially have your act together, right, and things aren't falling through the cracks, then they don't want to be getting daily updates because they don't want to be in the minutia, right? I think most elected officials, truly want their city managers to do the job, and it's a part-time volunteer type thing. They got their own lives to lead. They just want to know the organization is being run. That's why they hire you, right?
Exactly.
To do the job, right? But if you're able to establish that trust and that competency and that confidence, you don't have a governing body then looking over you, second-guessing every decision you make, one. And two, they are not going to be super gullible or apt to listen to some person in the community who's criticizing you and automatically take that for the gospel truth that somehow their city manager is screwing up, right?
And most of the time they heard it from me first.
There you go.
So, I think that advice definitely helped build the trust, and then going into the recruitment, I had one goal, that the city council would have no choice but to hire me. And by that, I meant I was going to be the most prepared. I was going to give them every option. I was going to show them why I was the number one choice. We had 45 or so applicants, many active or past city managers.
If they would have known what the city hall looks like, you probably would have had 400.
Probably would have had more.
Yeah.
I think for me, knowing that my goal was I wanted the job, but I didn't just want the job. I wanted it to be very clear.
You're going to take the job.
I was going to take it. It was going to be something that not only did I earn, but that I put all the steps in place for it to be successful.
Walk us through that. Like, what did you do differently, if anything, from when you were announced as the interim? Because you're like, hey, literally, this is an on-the-job audition, right? You knew that. Everyone knows this. You got an IQ north of 2. We all know what this is going on here. So, how did you How did you lay the groundwork for that? What was your plan of attack?
So the first thing was the press release announcing Jim's departure and that I would be interim made it clear in the press release that as interim, I was still going to be eligible for the full-time position. Because a lot of times, especially in California, if you're the interim, they're bringing someone in from the outside and that person isn't eligible for the position. So I wanted it to be very clear. I wanted to be intentional about that.
And Jorge, the other thing too is I think it's safe to say that if you were declared as the interim and you're competing for the position, that's probably going to scare off some competition. Because
that was very intentional.
Right? Okay. I want to make sure we're okay.
Very intentional.
Give me the head nod and make sure we're okay to cover this ground in the podcast.
No.
But yes, you are. Hey, listen, and this is something I talk about, Jorge, a lot. And I think sometimes in the public sector, a lot of executives miss that killer instinct and that sort of like in the jungle mentality. Like, this is a battle. You're competing for the position. You want the job. So use the powers of incumbency to
your advantage.
There you go.
Absolutely.
There you go. Absolutely.
And then once I went through the recruitment, I was very careful. I did not talk to the electeds. Very tempting to talk to them, during your weekly one-on-ones. Hey, so
you mean as far as dissecting or diverging from actual city business to the recruit? Yes.
Not once.
Yeah.
I always stayed away from it because I never wanted anyone to say that I did something inappropriate.
Right.
I worked through the recruiter, went through the process. We put several walls in place in our servers and different things so that I wouldn't be getting any emails, access to the drives, anything like that. And then,
kudos to you, by the way.
That was important.
Jorge, I'm sure I've complained quite a bit in the past about some of the internal recruitment processes, how they're handled. Because in some organizations, I've heard stories all the time about the interim sort of getting the resumes of the people, you know what I'm saying? It happens. And a lot of our peers look askance at these recruitments and get a little frustrated because of some of the shenanigans that occur, right?
So, Joe, the one thing for me is I didn't care who the other applicants were because all I could focus on is me.
You doing your job.
That's it.
And you already had the built-in advantage.
Yeah, it was already there.
It's fair to say your job to lose, right?
Yeah, of course.
It's first and goal from the 3-yard line. Are you going to punch it in,
So from there, it was, okay, how do I prepare? So, of course, everyone has a resume. Everyone has a cover letter.
Mm-hmm.
Fantastic. I put together a couple other documents. I gave them my city management philosophy. So what does it mean for me to be a city manager and how will I manage in that? I provided them a 100-day transition memo. Here's what I am going to do. Here's who I am going to meet with. Here is how I plan to gain your trust and the community's trust and stakeholders' trust.
Love it.
In the first 100 days.
Love it.
Acknowledging that I've already been here for 5 years at the time.
And of course, your 100-day plan also connotes that because you're not just putting some random names or position titles. You're putting the actual people.
I'm putting the people in it.
Yeah, exactly.
And then the insider advantage that I had is I've been with the city. So I gave them a 19-point organizational assessment. This is how I see the organization. These are some of the areas where I believe that we need to focus on. And here's how I'm going to accomplish some of these things short-term, mid-term, long-term, and letting them know that I look forward to discussing those with them. So I gave each of them a custom packet on the interview day. And I said, here's my assessment. Hire me or not. This is what your organization needs. And then I knew those 19 points so intricately that I interweaved it into all of my answers.
And because I'm circling back to the theme.
So they knew as they were answering, oh, that's actually number 14. If you look at it, it outlines how we're going to get to that, what the issue is, and some of the budgetary constraints that are going to be required with that. They had everything in front of them. And it wasn't just my interview. It wasn't just my resume. It was everything. I wanted to put the entire package together for them. Again, leave no question.
I love it.
But that I would be their choice. I've
talked about this with some people. I've never really talked about this on the podcast, and I've never even talked much about this on LinkedIn either, but I've talked about it with some of my closer peers, and I've actually given my advice to some of our peers. I'll be like, this is what I do. When I apply for a position, I'm not just turning in a resume and cover letter. That's just not, to me, that's just basically the starting expectation, right?
Yeah, that's baseline.
Right. I've done something similar. We're put together my philosophical approach to local governance, as well as providing like some of my promises or commitments, almost like a pledge, like a multi-point pledge that I say, this is what you're going to get from me. This is what I plan to deliver. This is how I plan to operate. And then I've also put together some different types of other materials depending on the recruitment itself. To me, it seems like a no-brainer, right? But not everyone does that. And to hear you say it, I love hearing that because it just, I love being in the company of, I know this is going to sound like a kiss-ass thing to say, but I love being in the company of exceptional individuals who are talented and who go above and beyond and just see things at a different level than just what the traditional average mediocre approach is, you know?
So I have a catchphrase that I've really championed as I've taken over, and that's that I want Pismo Beach to be the standard of excellence and innovation. So I have to live and breathe that.
Love it. You know, I don't want to sound self-serving when I say this, but I say this quite a bit, and I've had this repeated to me quite a bit, is a lot of the people who are in my orbit, that sounds very arrogant to say, I don't mean it to be arrogant, but, you know, whether it's the American Association of Municipal Executives, the City Management Filter podcast, my LinkedIn presence, some of the most innovative thinkers in the profession. Not all of them. You know, obviously there's other innovative thinkers out there, but we have some of the most innovative, talented people that are looking at the public sector through a completely different prism.
Yeah.
And I've talked about the paradigm shift in the public sector that is ongoing, and you know, it has to happen because things are not sustainable. Like a lot of the pressures and the risk and the volatility that city managers are facing, it's not sustainable. When you have the tidal wave of boomers that are retiring and the gray tsunami, right? That's not sustainable, right? Things have to be done differently. We have to be approaching talent from outside traditional sources. So you have to have non-traditional candidates applying for these executive level positions. We have to start relying more on innovation, technology, so forth and so on. So, man, that's just a testament to you, dude. You rock on.
Well, I think it goes back to surrounding yourself with the right people that have the right mentality. And I've been able to do that throughout my career. And you learn from everyone and everything. And I think once you figure out what your path is, you just got to keep walking it.
Yeah. I want to delve a little bit more into the recruitment and process for you to, you know, be selected to the top position.
Yeah.
One of the things that I think you would agree with, and I think most everybody listening to this podcast would agree with, is growing frustration, dissatisfaction with what I call the dog and pony show recruitments when you have an internal candidate. Okay. I have often made the argument, and I don't mean this exclusively, and this is the only way it should be done, but I've often made the argument that the internal candidate, for the most part, should be assessed, and then the government should make that assessment and then move on with them, you know, call it a wrap, or put them to the side and go on with the national recruitment, what they're going to do, with the explanation that there aren't any internal candidates. During our pre-interview chat before we started recording, you offered up a unique perspective on that, and I wanted to give you an opportunity to give the other side. Not that you necessarily disagree with my take, but I mean, let me rephrase it. How does a city like Pismo Beach or any other city who has a bona fide, legitimate internal applicant, right? How do you have a process that is not a quote unquote dog and pony show, that is fair to the internal candidate, but also the external candidates?
Yeah. I've had that frustration in other recruitments that I've gone through.
Absolutely.
Right? You think, oh, is there an internal? Yep. All right. Never mind. I'm not applying. Right. And to a certain extent, that probably benefited me in this case.
And not to step on you too, Jorge, the caveat on this is, by the way, you'd never had city manager experience before this. So this is a little bit of a, I don't want to say it's unique. It's not unheard of, obviously, but there are different types of internal candidates, right? There's internal candidates who have been in the chair before, and there's internal candidates who have not.
Yeah. For me, I think there definitely needs to be some alternative path, right? You kind of mentioned it, some type of an assessment. I think maybe some kind of standardized approach. Maybe AAME can look into that. Maybe we can collaborate and figure out what something like that might be that we can send to city councils and say, hey, if you have an internal, maybe you review this. But the one thing that the process provided me was the credibility both internally with the department heads, as well as the credibility with the community, because now they knew that there was a nationwide recruitment, that there were other existing city managers, and that I beat them out. Internally for the department heads, I'm the youngest by a long shot.
Really? How old are you, by the way?
I am 38.
Gosh. Killing it, guys.
So, you know, I think that between my age, the experience, you know, I had the pedigree, you know, undergraduate, master's degree, president of professional or associations, like
Large
everything. Large organizations, small,
the mentor,
like
yeah,
so. But the council has to be comfortable.
absolutely.
And if the council wasn't comfortable, then absolutely they needed to go through the recruitment. And for me, once I took over, having that credibility made it a lot easier, because when I would meet with community members, for us, the hotel industry is huge here, right? That's our economy. They're like, okay, you were vetted. You are the best. Now, it helped that I had the support of them previously in my dealings with them.
And it also helps too, Jorge, I would say, and sorry to step on you there, but I think it also helps to say that, hey, you have a stable elected body, right? You have an elected body that's held in high esteem by the community stakeholders, right? So I think that's another part of the equation too, that if the elected body says, hey, we're putting our stamp of approval on this gentleman, then that carries a lot of weight in the community for you.
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely.
And that's why I think I've learned that not all national recruitments are the same. They're different, right? And I think we've all learned that. But that was something that I didn't think about before. You know, had someone asked me 2 years before, hey, they're going to put you through, I'd be like, okay, well, maybe they don't want me, or maybe there's a problem.
Well, I was just going to ask you about that. Did that mess with your head a little bit? That put any seeds of doubt in your head when they decided to do the recruitment? Because I could see both. I mean, honestly, I could see me literally thinking both. I could be, yeah, well, I'm Joe Turner. I'm a badass. I'm going to compete and I'm going to take this job, and that's fine. And I can also have a part of me be like, oh man, maybe they don't really want me. I mean, shouldn't they already want me? I mean, I've been here for 4 years. That guy who's just been here for a decade, he's basically kind of signed off on me, right? I mean, it's like,
it messed with me for about a half a day.
Yeah.
And then I focused on the future.
The things you can control.
That's it. But yeah, of course, we all have those moments of, am I enough? Insecurity. But I gave myself about a half a day, and then I said, all right, what's next?
Did you feel you were ready at the time that he was going to step away, Lewis was going to step away, and you were going to...
100%.
You felt ready? 100%
I was ready.
Love it.
I was ready. From the moment that I interned on my first day, I knew that city government is what I wanted to do.
Yeah.
And every day was preparation to get to that goal.
This might be a little bit of a question. Maybe we'll edit out the podcast, so we'll see. What would have happened had you been passed over? Do you feel comfortable answering that question?
Yeah.
What do you think? What would happen there? Do you think you'd want to stay, or?
If I was passed over, my first priority would be to make the next person successful. And then to see who it is, and do they make me better? Do they make me a stronger candidate in the future? By that point, I knew I was going to stay on the Central Coast. So then at that point, it becomes, who do they bring in? Do they bring someone who's going to come in for 2 or 3 years that's just at the tail end of their career, and it's going to be me immediately following? Well, that's one thing.
Yeah.
Or if
they're bringing in a 40-year-old,
then, it may be a different conversation. But I had a lot of internal conversations about that and talked to different people about what does that look like. At that point, I think one, because of my age, two, because I fell in love with the community, I wasn't going to go anywhere immediately. It wasn't going to be, okay, I'm taking my ball and I'm going home.
Yeah.
Like, that wasn't going to be it. I had to be okay with that. And that's why I did tell them, as I mentioned, here's my assessment. Hire me or not, this is what your organization needs.
Right.
And I think that also gave them a feeling of reassurance.
Did you give any thought to, even for a moment, of not applying? I mean, you are relatively young. You have a family, kids. I mean, there's you enter the chair. There's a lot of risk.
A lot of risk.
If you get bounced out of here, your kids are changing schools because you're not. There's no other. If people don't know the geography here, there isn't another. You're not just going next door to getting a job.
Yeah, I was okay doing that.
Yeah.
You have to have those conversations. You have to be candid. And as I mentioned, my wife's in the industry. She understands it. And that was something that we were willing to do. I also believe in my skills, my abilities, and that as long as I maintained an open and honest dialogue and I was true to myself, true to my professional standards, my professional ethics, that I'd be okay. And worst case scenario, I make a few phone calls and, pick up the pieces. My severance contract was very important to me. That was something I wasn't willing to take a no on. I was willing, and that was another thing. It's one thing to get the job. It's another thing to negotiate your contract.
That's a great point.
And
a lot of our peers, man, they get emotionally wrapped up and sucked into the intoxicating, euphoric feeling of being selected, right? Oh, they want me.
Mm-hmm.
And then sometimes we end up fumbling the bag when it comes to the contract negotiations.
Yeah. So I knew the provisions that were important to me. And what I did is I hired an attorney to help put together my contract. The contract, as we know, can be an interesting dynamic.
Especially in California.
So I wanted an attorney to review it. I wanted to use my contract, not the previous contract, because I wanted it to have language that would benefit me and protect me.
I like that. Be proactive. Take charge of your career.
If for whatever reason it happened, I wanted to make sure that the way that I exit was already done, that there would be mutual releases, that there would be
to minimize damage, right?
Minimize damage, what the messaging would be. All of that is already laid out in my contract.
Yeah.
And I wanted to make sure that I was protecting myself, but I was protecting my family as well, because there is that volatility. They don't like my necktie at a council meeting, and that could be it. It's an oversimplification,
but we know it's very whimsical. Yes,
it
very
can
capricious. These council members can be, not necessarily in Pismo, but in the profession, we know.
Yeah, so you have to look out for those things. It was less than a couple $1,000s, but money well spent.
Invest in yourself. Yes,
it was money well spent.
Yeah.
I went through in California. We have the California City Management Foundation, and I went through a whole new and future city managers seminar. And as part of that, we go through model contracts. We go through negotiating your contract, things like that. And they had an attorney who put together a model contract. That's the basis of mine. It was a good investment.
I love it. That's something we got. It's on my to-do list for AAME, obviously, to get a model contract out there. Obviously, it's going to be varied by state to state,
Mm-hmm.
and contracts are such a unique thing that they can have many different components to them, or clauses, and unique situations unique language for each individual situation. It's interesting. This is my first in-person interview, and I'm loving it. And I'm taken aback by the level of confidence that you have, and it's nice to see. I wish the audience could kind of be in this room right now, because you have a lot of charisma with you, a lot of charm. There's a magnetism there, Jorge. And when I asked you a second ago if you felt you were ready, you said without hesitation you were ready. We have quite a few people who are going to listen to this podcast that are aspiring to be city managers, and they want to get in a chair, but they're going to have some doubts, so they're not going to feel ready or what have you. What advice would you give to those individuals to help them get ready and feel the level of confidence that you have? How did they get there?
The first thing is get involved. Get involved professionally. If you want to be a city manager, are you a part of AAME? Are you a part of your state? Are you a part of ICMA even?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
What are you doing to prepare yourself? Do you want the job, or do you want to excel in the job? That's the first decision. And once you've made the decision that you want to excel, get involved, participate, get on boards, volunteer to be on the committee that's doing the bylaws for whatever organization. Yeah. You have to surround yourself around the right people. And when you go to the conferences, don't just go to the session and then go to your hotel room and call it a night.
Make those relationships, right?
Make the relationships. Make those connections. I'm not saying you have to go out and do all the extracurriculars, but it's important. This is a people business. It is a people business. And you have to be able to make those phone calls. I know one of the people that you've talked to and on some of your LinkedIn posts, Howard Chan.
Yes.
I called Howard when I was negotiating my contract.
Did you?
Yeah.
Howard's a great guy.
I met Howard at the New and Future City Managers Conference. He was one of the instructors. Gave me his cell phone number. I know Howard on a personal basis.
Yes. And he's not a big timer. He doesn't big time. He's like, I'm Mr.
Nope.
I work for 500,000 people and make oodles and oodles of money.
Howard is the most down to earth guy.
Yes.
But I met him by being involved.
You took the initiative.
And that's, I think, the number one piece of advice.
Love it.
Get involved. when you get involved and you make relationships with people, you'll go far. And you don't have to be an extrovert. You don't have to be charismatic, but just reach out and let someone know, hey, I'm interested, and ask questions.
Well, I think it kind of goes back to what we said earlier in the podcast about you having a mentor who is out there giving you a push, right? And looking out for you and wanting to help you. I think the same goes with having people who are your peers in the profession who like, hey, I need help with this, or help, get some feedback. It's so much different to leave your house, going out into the world, going out into battle, right? As far as in this profession, knowing that you have people all across the state or country who will pick up a phone call if you need help and give you their assistance. I mean, yeah.
And I do it for people. I mentor a bunch of folks that are analysts. Some of them are interns because people did it for me.
Yes.
You gotta give it back. This again is not, how do I win and someone else loses?
Absolutely.
No. We have to be actively involved and engaged in the success of ourselves, but in the success of others. It comes back.
Absolutely. You got these people who are aspiring to be city managers. This ain't a 9-to-5 job, right? This is not, you don't just check out of work and leave it at the office, right? It goes home with you. What are some of the things that you've experienced in your year plus in the interim and permanent role as the city manager for Pismo?
Well, I can tell you, it definitely is not 8 to 5. It is 24/7 with moderation, of course. But I think what you don't know and the weight of what you don't know is when your phone rings at 3 a.m. and it's the police chief calling and he's letting you know that there was a criminal incident in your city. You are not prepared for that phone call. Because as soon as you wake up and you see that call,
it ain't a good call. We know it's bad.
It's not a good call when your police chief calls you at 3 a.m. And then everything goes through your mind. One, you're instantly awake.
Yes.
And
adrenaline flowing.
And now your adrenaline's flowing. You have to figure out, okay, am I waking up counsel? Am I making phone calls? Am I sending a
press
text,
statement,
an email?
Yeah.
All the things go through your mind. And it's up to you. And then you have to figure, okay, what is my responsibility versus what is my police chief's responsibility?
Two different things.
Versus my PIO.
Absolutely.
And what do I want to handle versus what am I delegating? And you're making those decisions instantly.
Out of a slumber.
Cold dead of the night.
There isn't a playbook, right? There's like if A do B, if X do Y. That's not there.
Nope. You have to make those decisions. And you have to have the conversation with your chief. We had it early on. Okay, if I don't answer, let's say I didn't answer at 3 a.m., at what point do you knock on my door? You have to have those conversations. Those are the things that you don't think about. A lift station fails and you have a sewer spill. At what point are you calling?
Well, this is California, by the way. This is
we have a whole lot of environmental triggers and all kinds of things that automatically happen. But those are the things that I think when you're thinking about the job.
And you're not always going to get it right.
No.
It's just not, that's not the way it works. And so that's where it also gets back to having that built up trust and goodwill, right? And also hoping that obviously you want to have the history and the proficiency to make good decisions, but also you've built up the goodwill bank on the months preceding. So if you do step in it, that you have some grace.
Yeah. Luckily things have been going well. But yeah, you need to collect those brownie points, put those chips in your pocket because you never know when you're going to need them. So if you're aspiring to be a city manager, talk to your city manager and ask them what keeps you up at night and what's it like getting that call at 3 a.m.
Yeah. Shout out to the spouses too, Jorge, because, we've
absolutely.
I've actually tried to get a few spouses on the show, but it's been difficult. People get stage fright, so to speak. But, when you are a city manager, it places a huge burden and stress load on your spouse, on not just from the abuse and the slings and arrows that get shot at their husband or wife, but also the stresses of possibly having to relocate, the stresses of them trying to advance and pursue their career. Because frankly, in most households, the spouse's career is going to take a backseat to the city manager's career. And that can be really difficult, right? So I think a lot of aspiring city managers, it's, do you really want the job, or do you want the trappings, or you think are the trappings of the job, or the ego boost, or what have you? I have a lot of individuals who reach out to me on LinkedIn, and they're aspiring city managers, and they'll say, I really want to be a city manager, or what kind of advice do you have? And one of the first things I ask is like, well, why do you want to be a city manager? Like, well, why?
Yeah.
And I had one individual recently, they responded back, oh, I really like to help people. And I haven't responded back because I was really kind of disappointed by that answer, to be honest, because it's like, well, okay, that's pretty vanilla and basic. You can
Yeah.
help people a lot of different ways. What is it about being a city manager that you think is going to make you help people in a different way or whatnot? It's got to be more to it than that. You got to go more than just surface layer deep on the onion, because we can all say we want to help people. We're public servants by definition. Why do you want to be a city manager? So when I talk to some of the aspiring folks, I say, hey, if you go down this path, you have to be prepared to live a fairly transient lifestyle unless you're going to be locked into like a major metroplex where there aren't residency requirements and what have you. And then if you're not married now, what is your future spouse going to think about that life? So, oh man.
It requires a lot of open, honest, difficult conversations. And I'll take it a step further. Also, your kids.
Yes.
My kids go to school at our local public school here. With my position,
Dad's name's in the paper every now and then,
Dad's
right?
name's in the paper, or there's different things. And there have been conversations where I've had to have with my kids on, you do not have to answer for me. You do not have to protect me. If someone says something, walk away. That's not a conversation I was thinking about
Ever having, right?
Ever.
Yeah.
The circumstances lended itself to it. And I was like, wow, I have to sit my kids down. And at 10 and 6, explain to them what that means.
And you know what? You can tell a 10-year-old, you can tell a 12-year-old that they don't have to defend their father, but you're still their father.
Yeah. Oh,
And
they will.
They want to protect
Yeah.
their dad.
Yeah.
It's like, I've talked to so many wives of city managers who just get so frustrated because they see their husband getting crucified in
Yeah.
the local media or whatnot, and they want to defend their husband,
Mm-hmm.
and rightfully so. It's tough. It's really tough. Hey, a minute ago you talked about the 3 a.m. phone calls and maybe a broken sewer line or a lift station. I do believe you're in the market for a public works director. Is that correct?
I am. So I have opened a public works director position, made some changes to it. Now that I've been here, obviously a year, I wanted to take another look at my public works department. We had a recent opening, so I changed it, and it's no longer public works director / city engineer. It's now just public works director.
Okay.
So really looking for more of a generalist, heavy operations background. So if someone is interested, reach out to me on LinkedIn, reach out to me via email. The recruitment is live now. It'll go through November 15th. We have an amazing opportunity for someone to make waves in Pismo Beach, lead our department. We just completed a public works assessment, top to bottom, looking at what are our strengths and what are our opportunities. How can we be a more innovative organization? How can we make the investments that are going to pay off for the community? So I'm looking for someone. They can be in California, out of California. That doesn't matter to me. We have relocation incentives that we can discuss. But what's most important is that I have someone who has the mindset of excellence, someone who wants to roll up their sleeves, have an amazing impact, and do some innovative things.
Awesome. In California and Pismo, is that all state responsibility, or do you actually have city responsibility for beaches?
We have city responsibility for our portion of the beach.
Does that fall under the Public Works Department?
Falls under Public Works.
That's pretty sexy. Hello.
So we have our own water utility, wastewater utility. Right now we're trying to build an advanced wastewater treatment plant to take our effluent, treat it to drinking standards, and then inject it into the ground and pump it back up.
Awesome.
So we're doing some innovative things here in Pismo Beach. Great staff. And, if you're interested, reach out. Let me know.
Awesome. November 15th is the deadline?
November 15th.
Coincidentally, that is the deadline for those who are applying to be the ICMA CEO. And I will definitely get this podcast out before then so that hopefully we can get some eyes or ears on this listing for you. I've been actually working on this and haven't got much traction on it yet because I've been so focused on other stuff. But one of the things I did want to do with the podcast, Jorge, is turn into some, every now and then, do some episodes with Come Work With Me episodes where maybe a city manager can highlight an ACM position or a department head position and turn into like a living, breathing job brochure, like a paid podcast episode,
Yeah.
What have you. So I'll definitely get this out before November 15th. And I hope that, well, I don't hope, I know they did. So if they're interested in this position, they're going to get a good sense of who their future city manager is going to be, because obviously we've had a really good discussion here. I'm really excited for you. I'm really grateful that we have an opportunity to get together today, that you're my first in-person interview, because I really enjoyed it. It's a different dynamic sitting across the table from somebody as opposed to the electronic, digital, Zoom-like interface that I normally have.
I've appreciated it. This is a lot of fun. We've had chats even before AAME started. I've been excited to be a proud founding member. And
Thank you.
Again, excellence is important. And I think what you and others are doing with AAME is just proof of how we can get there.
Thank you, brother. Thank you very much. All right, we're going to wrap it up here. I'm Joe Turner. This is the City Manager Unfiltered podcast, a podcast for city managers and other public sector executives. It is the most influential local government podcast in America. If you are a fan of the show, which you are because you're listening, please hit that follow, subscribe button. Please hit the 5-star rating on your platform of choice and leave a review if you can. Thank you very much, and catch you next week.